Legal highs and club drugs are ruining the lives of young people. Just because they say they're legal doesn't mean they're safe. And young people could be sleepwalking towards disaster without even knowing it. Hester Stewart was a 21-year-old award-winning medical student. She died after taking a combination of GBL and alcohol, given to her by a friend after an awards ceremony.
She was an amazing person. She just lit up people's lives.
She was brilliant. She was bubbly, fun.
She'd been out for an awards night and they'd had a few glasses of alcohol during the dinner.
Hester went home from that evening and took what was then a legal high called GBL. She fell asleep, fell into a coma and never woke up. And I never saw my best friend again.
Louise Cattell was a 21-year-old talented artist. She drowned in the bath after taking more ketamine than her body could cope with.
She had her whole life ahead of her. She was a graduate from the London School of Fashion. She was just amazing. She was very funny, very talented. She started DJing, taking photographs, running club nights.
Louise was having a dinner party with some friends. Then she took ketamine.
And she couldn't get to sleep. She took a bath and she died. They say losing a child is actually like losing a part of yourself. And if you are, particularly I think if you're the mother and you've nurtured that child in your womb, it is like losing a limb.
Freddie McConnell was an 18-year-old gifted musician. He started taking legal highs at 14 and eventually died from heroin at 18.
I think we first got very worried about him when he was about 13 and he started experimenting with amyl nitrate.
I think he tried a skunk, I think he tried all sorts of things. The thing that really got him was MCAT. It's poisonous stuff, and he didn't want to eat, and he got argumentative, he got difficult, he got violent, he was nothing like the Freddie that we'd known. He just destroyed himself, and I couldn't do anything to stop it.
Legal highs and club drugs are not only killers, they can also cause so much harm to young people, both mentally and physically. Olivia began taking legal highs before taking ketamine.
The reality hit quite fast. Like, I started taking K every day and got ill very quickly, basically. Started to get bladder problems like cramps and needing the loo every 5 minutes, just looked rubbish. Was just a mess, basically. I'm 23 years old and I've seen a lot of things that I should never have seen, and I've had to face death, my own mortality, on such a frequent basis, and that's changed me forever. And I think if someone was to ask me ever as well, was it worth it? Was it worth that first line? Was it worth the first smoke? Was it worth whatever? I'd say no.
Kat Hedger was 19 when her drink was spiked with GHB. She's been in a wheelchair ever since and is paralysed from the waist down.
The scream that went through the hospital ward, because I couldn't feel my left-hand side. My whole left side was paralysed. And no one could tell you how that feels, because until you've experienced it yourself, that is terrifying. And waking up in hospital where you don't even remember how you got there. The last thing I knew, I was in the pub.
Experts explain some of the problems we face.
People who present to hospital A&E departments don't necessarily know what it is that's put them there. So we need laboratory services in order to find out what the chemical is that's responsible for them being in hospital.
To call an ambulance costs £400, a night in hospital is £500, a night in ITU is about £2,000. You don't need to reduce the number of admissions to an emergency department or an intensive care unit in order not just to make that money back, but more importantly, to save and improve lives.
So Andrew, my huge concern is drugs education not being taught in all schools at a time when there's never been a bigger need.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it, that that drug education isn't compulsory in schools at the moment. There was a recent mapping survey of schools which found that 60% of them, both primary and secondary schools, only deliver drug education once or less a year.
Dr. Owen Bowden-Jones, one of the Angelus experts, explains some of the problems he sees from regular users of club drugs.
Well, it depends on the drug. So, for instance, with ketamine, which is an anaesthetic, we're seeing all sorts of problems around the bladder. For mephedrone, which is a stimulant, we're seeing people describe psychosis, we're seeing people describe personality change. With GBL or GHB, we're seeing severe dependence.
We only have to look at the recent press stories which illustrate just how harmful these club drugs and legal highs can be. Every parent's worst nightmare. Joe Bennett, a 17-year-old student from London, died in September 2012. He was in a coma for 4 weeks after inhaling butane, which he thought was a legal high. Doug Ferguson was a 19-year-old medical student who took the legal high AMT. He died while celebrating the end of his first university year. Adam Hunt and Christopher Scott died after taking alpha-methyltryptamine, known as AMT. Adam was an 18-year-old student from Southampton who'd bought the substance online. Sarah Forsyth got addicted to the then legal substance Ivory Wave and died just 1 year after her wedding. The bodies of 17-year-old Hugo Wen and 25-year-old Daniel Lloyd were found in a pond in Canterbury in January 2012. The police investigating their deaths found they both had methoxetamine and alcohol in their bodies. Methoxetamine, also known as MXE, is a ketamine lookalike. Alex Howes was a talented 26-year-old who took the substance 5-MeO-Dolt with friends in a pub after a family dinner. He was killed when he walked in front of a lorry on the motorway whilst hallucinating. Chris Dyer was a young and dynamic Scotsman who got addicted to GBL. He walked out of a first-floor window, which he thought was a door. He ended up as a paraplegic in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He was 24 when he died. Sean Paul Carnahan from Belfast was just 22 when he fell into a coma after taking the legal stimulant China White. He died a week later. Richard Phillips was an IT expert from Cornwall. He was 26 and the father of a 2-year-old daughter. Whilst at a birthday celebration, he took a toxic mix of N-bomb and alcohol.
He'd been drinking all day, and in the afternoon apparently took a substance called N-bomb. Almost immediately he suffered a severe reaction, including very serious fits, which starved oxygen to his brain. He then had multiple organ failure, everything, his body shut down. He was rushed to hospital in Truro, which is the main area in Cornwall. He was then flown to King's in London for specialist liver and kidney treatment. When they managed to get him breathing on his own and actually putting food into his stomach, they decided to wake him up from his sedation. When they woke him up, it was clear that he'd suffered serious brain damage and has not really made any recovery from that.
These substances have resulted in the hospitalisation of many young people. 3 teenagers from Blythe smoked something legal called Clockwork Orange. They ended up in A&E vomiting blood. Don't let your child be next. It can happen to anyone. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. Let's stop our young people playing Russian roulette with their lives. To find out how to have wiser conversations with your kids, visit the Angelus Foundation website and download the Parents' Handbook. And while you're at it, send your children to the dedicated website for young people, whynotfindout.org.